Hey geeks, welcome to another exciting episode of Rockin the Code World with dotNetDave. I'm David McCarter. I'm glad you're here. And I wanted to not forget next week, I hope you'll watch the show because next week, next Saturday, same time, same place, same channel, is going to be our second anniversary show. So I'm really excited. This is show number 66. That'll be show number 67. And I'm excited to have to talk about the last 2 years and where we've been, where we're going, invite some of my favorite speakers on to say hi, and we'll see what happens. So I hope you check it out next week. I want to say that before I forget. So let's get into this week's show. I hope everybody's doing great this weekend and doing something fun besides coding, except for watching this show. This isn't really coding, right? This is fun show. And hopefully you'll learn something. So, this week I have Jason Alba. He's a Pluralsight author, a longtime Pluralsight author, and we're going to be talking about soft skills. And soft skills is something that I write and talk about a lot. And I think it's very important for all of us to learn these skills because it really, really, really does help us in our career. And I've spoken about this a lot in the last 20, 30 years. I've been speaking and writing and all that kind of stuff. So I'm looking forward to the show. So show 66 today, September 24th. Hope everybody's having a great weekend. We're getting hit by a heat wave again. So hopefully it's not going to be as bad as last time because last time was pretty bad. But I don't complain too much about the weather in San Diego because, we have the best weather in the country. All right. So let's not forget about our friends in the Ukraine. If you can support them in any way, please do. I know they've been taking back some land that the Russians have taken, but unfortunately that has pissed off who, and he's now drafting 300,000 Russians to come fight in the war. So I think the next couple of months are going to be tough for the Ukraine. So please send your thoughts and prayers to them and any support that you can provide to the Ukraine. Because, I say this every week, but I have selfish motives for this because I've been to the Ukraine. I love the Ukraine. I really, really want to go back, before I stop, speaking. And so I kind of want this wrapped up so I can go back because, I've talked about this a lot, that I spent 5 days in Lviv, where a lot of the news comes from about the war. And I just loved my time there. And I've been trying to go back ever since. And but anyway, this is a ridiculous war by, a terrorist, if you ask me, and we need to get rid of it soon because it's affecting the whole world, as we all see, So I'm going to stop now. Otherwise, I'll get into politics, and I don't want to talk about that on the show. In a couple of weeks is the CSharpCorner annual conference. I'm excited to announce that, a lot of us will be back, myself, along with Alan O'Neill, Magnus Martinson, Joe G, Mahesh, and a bunch of other speakers. We're going to be going to 5 different cities, ending up in Delhi for a 2-day conference in Delhi. And then I think the day after that is a blockchain 1-day conference, if that's right, Simon. And so there's going to be lots of fun there. It's going to be the first in-person conference, since COVID hit. And so I'm super, super excited about coming back and seeing all of you because I've missed you during these, 3 years or so. I haven't been in India. And I was just telling Jason before the show that I really love, the Indian people. And, one of the things I love about the Indian people, at least the Indian software engineers, is you really love to learn. And I like going places where people want to learn. And that's why we're there. And so I hope you'll join us for the fun in the 5 different cities we're going to be in. I have lots of stuff I'm bringing, like dotNetDave guitar picks and stickers and anything else I can stick in my suitcase to give out to you guys while I'm there. And I'm also going to bring my my Indian shirt to wear. I'm going to wear that on one of the stops before Delhi. And a kurta, I always pronounce it wrong, so I'm sorry. But Simon gave me last year for, I think, was it the anniversary show or some other conference? Simon, you gave me, yeah, it was the anniversary show last year. Simon gave me a really, really nice kurta. And so I plan to wear that when I do a keynote speech in one of the cities there. So anyway, I hope you'll join us. If you're nearby, if you're not nearby, get on a train and come join us for fun. It's going to be a great time. All right, Spargene, a new version of Spargene was released in August, and I'm always working on a new version of that. So if this Spargene is my open source software I've had for a very, very long time, essentially since .NET 2, and I'm constantly working on new stuff for the library, and I'm getting ahead of myself. So I hope you go check it out. It's available on GitHub. It's also available on NuGet. And it's basically all the common code that I use from company to company and company to company that I just don't like writing over and over again. And so that's what Spargene's all about. And I unit test it, I benchmark it, and I'm constantly working on it. So I'll be working on this as long as I'm doing .NET, I guess. So I want to welcome Jason. Jason Alba started his professional career as a programming intern at a fertilizer company. He became passionate about dev projects that support business functions and loved jumping from HR to finance to management projects. His passion is strategy, execution of strategy, which led him to pioneer an IT management role in growing facility in a growing facility management company. Sorry, Jason. Jason's career took a drastic turn in 2006 when he was laid off. I know that story, and started what he calls a big fat failed job search. That's what I'm experiencing right now. This created room for his start a software company, get 3 books published, become a professional speaker, and invest in other companies. And Jason has done 36 courses on Pluralsight. That's a lot, Jason. So welcome, Jason.
Hey, thank you. It's so good to be here. I'm going to apologize right now. I'm coming off of COVID, so I'm going to cough. I got a cough drop, and my energy is a little bit lower, but I'm super excited to be here and talk about soft skills and professional development, and kind of maybe a little different than what you normally talk about on this show, right?
Yeah. And that's what the show is all about, is, talking about all these things, because, software development is just not coding, right? It's a lot of things, and I really don't bar anything on my show except for politics and religion. So
yeah. And it's critical because, if you don't go into soft skill things, you're not having a holistic conversation about the career, and then beyond that, the career is only just part of your overall life, right? You have personal stuff outside.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of the stuff that I found over the years that I've been focusing on soft skills just bleeds everywhere, right? It's not just for, how to be a better employee or how to get a job or how to get a promotion. Really, one of my favorite comments was, I think it was on my listening course, Becoming a Better Listener. And this person wrote in and they said, "Oh, thank you so much. I just broke up with my girlfriend last night. It was a really long conversation and it was a bad conversation. I'm going to go back and have this conversation again using these listening skills." And I thought it was so funny, but also awesome, right? Because I'm impacting someone just beyond, their day job or whatever.
Yeah.
And so that's one of the things I love about soft skills. It makes you a better human, a better citizen, a better everything, hopefully. And honestly, I think it can help make you more satisfied at work, right?
Mm-hmm.
More happy and have more content at work.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad you're feeling better. I'm sorry you got COVID, but I'm glad you're there and not here in person. And because I don't want to get COVID before my trip, knock on wood, I haven't got COVID yet. And so I'm being super careful the next 2 weeks.
Yeah.
So I don't get it before I go. And but of course I'll be taking COVID tests in my suitcase with me. And and soft skills, I think I said at the top of the show, is something that you use your entire career, and it really does help your career. And when I hit 25 years of speaking, I did an article and also a conference session about just how much 25 years of speaking has dramatically impacted my life, not only, my career, but my personal life also. And I went through that in the article and the conference session. And back in the 90s, when I forced myself to learn how to speak, I didn't really know why I was doing that, other than I knew I would need that in the future. Right. And I went through, because, I've said this a bunch, but, when I started speaking, I would rather die than speak. And a lot of people don't believe me that I say that now, because I wasn't like this, 28 years ago. I was very an introvert. I didn't like talking too much, and so, speaking alone has helped me dramatically come out of that shell. And it's improved my life, including personal life too. But you talk about listening. Yeah, I think any woman out there will say that men don't listen. So, we have a hard time at that.
Let's take that back to the workforce. Any non-technical person will say that their developer doesn't listen, right? That's a stereotype.
Yeah.
And I remember one time I got off stage somewhere, I don't know, and I told a little bit of my story, how I started out as a developer, and then my career changed. And so I'm on stage and I did a great job, and this lady comes up to me and she says, "Were you really a programmer? Because programmers they don't do what you just did." Right. Yeah. And so it's interesting, because we have this really cool opportunity as technologists to change. I don't know if we need to change the stereotype, right? Like, I'm not going to put that on anybody. I think that's a very heavy call, but we can break the stereotype for us, right? And so if we're in an organization and, people find out for example, we're a programmer, their first thought is, okay, very smart, probably intellectually conceited, not going to listen or pay attention. If I'm in a meeting with them, I'm going to say 3 sentences. And then they just kind of go off in their imagination and come up with their own specs without listening to my whole problem. Right. And I want to make sure that I'm heard, right? And so practicing this suite of soft skills, including listening and all these other things that I talk about, you're going to come out of a meeting as you practice these skills. For example, in listening, I talk about this thing called active listening. And so active listening, very similar to what they call reflective listening, where basically somebody says something to you and you would say, "Let me make sure I understand this correctly. Are you saying that?" And then you repeat it back to them.
Right.
If you do that, if you do just that one thing, you're going to walk out of there and people are going to say, "Yeah, that guy listens to me. That guy is the first tech head, gearhead that has ever listened to me. I like that person." And that's going to become part of your brand, is that you're more of a human and less of just a 1 and 0 thinker.
Yeah. And that's exactly what they teach in couples counseling, right? Is you repeat what the other person is saying, so the other person knows that you acknowledge exactly what they were saying, right?
Yeah.
And I think that serves two, things. Is not only does that person hopefully understand that you're getting it, but I think you repeating it makes you get it better, right? Yeah. It's like I'm terrible with names, right? But if I repeat it enough, then I learn it, right? And so it's kind of something like that. So before we get too far into the weeds in this, because we don't have any questions yet, Deepak, I'm looking forward to seeing you in Delhi. So make sure you stop by and say hi and take a selfie before I run out of dotNetDave guitar picks. And so to get everybody on the same page, in your mind, what are soft skills? Can you define it in like 1 or 2 sentences?
I think about soft skills, when we go through like a CS program or whatever technical training we have to become a developer, for example, those are hard skills, right? Making this thing move faster, jump higher, optimizing something, creating a process that does a bunch of things. Typically, these are hard skills. Every profession has them. Accountants have hard skills. Engineers, the hard skills aren't necessarily hard, but they're usually technical, right? The soft skills have to do with interaction with people. They have to do with how you treat others, how you present yourself to others, how you interact with others. And it's interesting because I think sometimes people hire in technical roles, they hire for your hard skills, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, do I have these qualifications? Can I do these things, right?
Right.
Some of the final hiring decisions, though, are made on soft skills, right? If you've been in a hiring situation where you have 2 or 3 people in front of you and they all pretty much can do the job,
Mm-hmm.
and then it starts to become, who do I think I'm going to like to work with, right?
Yeah.
And
Mm-hmm.
that is going to be a soft skills thing, and that will be impacted by how you presented yourself, and
Mm-hmm.
were you arrogant, or were you too quiet or shy? I remember I was in an interview a few years ago, and we were looking for somebody with a very specific set of skills, and this person had it. Like, he was very, very qualified. He had a PhD in the topic, but his energy level was off the charts.
Mm-hmm.
Super cool guy, and I thought this would be a fun guy at a party, but I could not think about working next to this guy bouncing around. Like, in the interview, he had physical energy that was just amazing, and for me, honestly, it was too much, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so that was a soft skill thing of
Mm-hmm.
how he presented himself.
Right. Yeah, and I've interviewed the same types of people. When I interview people, I always, I usually leave these towards the end of the interview, but I always have questions in there to determine your soft skills. Not only do I pay attention during the interview itself, but then I also have questions at the end too, right? And
Yeah.
because
Like what are some of your soft skill questions you might ask?
Well, I'm not sure if this is exactly a soft skill, but it's the only one coming to the top of my mind. And that is, one question I always ask is, how do you keep up with technology? Right.
Yeah.
And because, I've said this over and over again, that I want to hire people that want to learn, and not somebody who thinks they know everything. Right. And because our world changes every day. So I'm not sure if that's exactly a soft skill, but
hey,
problem
stuff
solving.
like that. Problem
Problem
solving is a soft
solving.
skill, and you just asked a problem solving question, right?
Right.
And so that yeah, I think that's, and see, the interesting thing about that, Dave, is that when we go into an interview, sometimes we take the question at face value, and a lot of times what we really need to do is think, okay, why is this question being asked? Like, what is it that they're after? They're not asking me which books or podcasts or how I do it. They want to learn about me as a person. They want to know
Right.
if I want to learn this stuff, or if I'm just kind of forced to keep up, and I kind of
Yeah.
hate learning all this newfangled stuff. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So yeah, definitely a soft skill question.
Yeah, and the new term that's come up in very, very recently, that there's this new term going around called quiet quitting, right?
Yeah.
And I was tweeting back to somebody the other day about this, and I was going, well, that just is the term for 9-to-5er, right? They just came up with a new term for 9-to-5er, right?
Yeah.
And I've been saying this ever since I've been teaching and everything, is that in this job, you can't be a 9-to-5er. If you want to go up the ladder of success, the way that a lot of us have, right? You can't be a 9-to-5er, right? If you just want to keep your head down and code for your entire career, then yeah, that's okay. But if you want to get into the high figures of salary and not only money, but satisfaction, right? You can't be a 9-to-5er in this job, right?
Yeah.
And I tell my, the beginner class at UCSD, I tell my students that, so they know the first class they take is that if you're here to work 9-to-5, you should find a different job, because this is not it. And getting back to the interview, I wrote about this a bunch in my interview book, and that is, one of my, because I usually do the technical interview unless that person's actually coming into my team, right? And most companies I go to, since I'm the .NET expert, I get corralled into doing all the technical interviews. And one company that I reference a lot is the VP of the the department said everybody interviews with Dave first. If they can't get through Dave, that's it, right? We send them home and the interview process is over because yeah, you have to get through the technical interview part of the interview.
Yep.
But like you said, there's going to be multiple interviews later with the manager, with HR, and those are the soft skill interviews, right?
Yeah.
And that's where, we do a lot of things like, when I coach people when they're in the interview, one of the things I tell them not to ask in most of the interview process until we get to the end is salary, right? Because that can be a red flag, right? If the first thing out of your mouth when you're in the first interview is what's my salary and what's the what's the benefits here, that is not going to go well, because that to me signals that you're really only here for those two things.
Yeah.
Right. And that's not why
I'm there
right,
for
the 9 to 5er. And that's not why I want to hire somebody, right? And especially now that teams are so small these days that we have to hire the right people for teams. When I did a poll, the average team size is about 5 people, right? So we can't even afford to have a 9 to 5er in that mix, right? Because it's just not going to work well for the timeline of the projects and things.
Yeah. I love, if you're that first line, the question that in the interview process, right, the multiple interviews, the question that they have to answer with you is this person proficient? Like, can they do the job? Right. And then the next level, and I mentioned this earlier, am I going to like working with this person? But another question is, like, am I going to be proud to put this person in front of my colleagues? Because I remember one time I hired a programmer who looked amazing. And then I'd go into management meetings with my peers, like managers from other departments. And I started hearing from these other managers saying, hey, Jason, can you kind of keep your guy under control? Because he'll come over and talk to me and stand in my doorway for like a half an hour. And I don't even know how to get him to leave. And he's doing that to my employees. And I was like, oh, crud. Like the person had proficiency, but now he's like completely embarrassing me as a manager. And like he's showing that he doesn't have certain boundaries. And I wasn't aware that this was happening, but it was reflecting poorly on me. But, a manager goes through that once or twice, and then they start looking at potential hires thinking, is this person going to represent me well? Am I going to be proud to have them on my team? Because I want my other managers to look at me and say, man, Jason really knows how to put together an awesome team. His team's amazing. And so that's what I'm looking for. After that proficiency level, I'm looking for some of those other things. And a lot of that really does come from the soft skills arena.
Yeah. And so the follow-up question I had to kind of what soft skills were, and we've kind of been talking about it already, but, why are soft skills so important for developers in your mind?
It goes back past the interview. When you get hired, there's assumptions, right? There's stereotypes of what a programmer is. They're extremely competent in having code that's relatively clean. Nobody hires someone thinking, okay, this guy or gal is not good at what they do, right? They're proficient, they can do the job. But what I've seen is that programmers, developers are being brought more and more into business meetings, right? I was in meetings recently, and there was people across the organization, and the developers are represented there. We already know that you're brilliant. We know that you're smart. When you're sitting there, we also want you to share some of that brilliant and smart, right? So if you walk into a meeting and you're quiet the whole time and you don't contribute, we're thinking like, okay, it was nice that they were there and they can take information back, or maybe they need to think about it or whatever. But it sure would have been nice if they would have said, hey, here are some considerations from the developers as far as, this issue at hand. And here's some things that you might need to think about. Being able to, kind of raise your hand and be assertive and say the right things and not fumble, not take too much time, right? I don't know if you've been in meetings where somebody hijacks the meeting.
Yes.
They're telling a very long story, or they're trying to get all the details in and only like 10% of the details matter. or they go way off in a whole different direction, and the meeting just has to be completely rescheduled. These are some of the things that's going to make me think I want to invite this person back on my special teams, or I don't ever really want to have, I mean, let them do their job that they're good at and they're hired for, and they have a manager to manage them. But I don't really want them because they screw up my team. Like they mess up my team culture and they get in the way of my objectives and things like that. When you can present yourself well and you have practiced and continue to practice these soft skills, you're going to become a valued member of a team more than just the technical projects that you're working on. And some people don't want that. Like not everybody wants to go do stuff like that.
Sure.
But, you were talking earlier about, either increases in income or opportunities or job satisfaction. I personally really enjoy feeling highly valued. It's important for me that people around me and leaders and understand that I'm not just a cog, right, in a wheel. I want to go into an environment and have them say, you know what, we really need to have Jason Alba on this team, right? That happens as I practice my soft skills with people around me.
Right. And I can't speak for every other career out there, but and I'm thinking mostly of males, but a lot of males in our industry have problems with social skills in the beginning, right? And maybe that's one of the reasons why they are in this industry, because they can do, they're kind of accepted in a way because they're smart and they can get the work done. But yeah, I've heard a lot of really disturbing stories, about, you were talking about how, we don't want them to talk, or they might screw up the team and things like that. I've heard some really disturbing stories. And so, and that's kind of one of the reasons I'd like to talk about this stuff, because I think awareness, makes things better. Like, for example, this was a number of years ago when I was up in Silicon Valley before the Silicon Valley Code Camp, and I was talking to a female there. I won't say who she is, and she told me a story that I didn't even know was happening. And the story she told me, which is still a topic of a show I want to do, but I'm having a hard time getting people to come on and do it, and that is just how derogatory and negative open source males are to women, right? And just how bad they are. I mean, to the point where women are leaving,
Tech.
this industry
As a career,
leaving tech because of this, right? Until she told me the story, I had no clue what was going on, because I'm not that way. I just don't see the world that way. And so I didn't know this was happening. And so when I do hear stories, again, mostly from females, I'm just floored. And so I do like to bring these things up, even though they might be a hard thing to talk about.
Yeah. I remember back when I was in school, back in the 1900s, the professors the technical professors would joke about, like, yeah, basically you get a programmer and throw them in a dark room and throw pizza under the door, and you just leave them alone for like 3 or 4 days, and then they'll come out and they'll have something amazing. And so it's interesting that today we're fighting those stereotypes of the, I don't know, the 60s. I don't know when they became really prevalent, but like thick glasses and the pen protectors 60s, 70s, and the pocket protectors, all that stuff. And things have changed, right? And I've seen that evolution. There's more women in the industry, which is fantastic. There's a younger audience that tends to be more hip and cool. There definitely is. I don't know. I feel like there's more personality and less of that super nerd stereotype. However, have you seen the movie Temple Grandin on Amazon?
I haven't.
It's so good. And I might spoil a tiny bit of this. It's a lady who, she's still alive. She's extremely accomplished. And she found out in her teens, I think, that she was autistic. And she went on to revolutionize the cattle industry, the meat industry. And it was just so fascinating to learn and watch her story as someone who is on the spectrum. Okay. And so anyways, I went and just did some research on Temple Grandin, and I found a YouTube video where she did like this hour-long presentation in front of, I want to say like psychologists or educators or something like that. And she made this statement that just blew me away. And I'm still kind of really thinking about this and what it means. She said, and I don't know what data or any research this is off of, but she said, if I remember correctly, that she believes that over half of the people in Silicon Valley, and you can extrapolate that out to like any tech hub, even like the tech team in a company, over half the people in Silicon Valley are on the spectrum.
I thought
that was fascinating because, well, what does that mean? What does that mean? Right. And so you get these people who are just amazingly excellent at drilling down on certain things and being able to focus, but then the social skills aren't there. Right. And so if you have someone who, because of being on the spectrum, doesn't understand certain social cues, or a lot of these soft skills that we're talking about, well, what does that mean? Right. And I definitely don't mean to offer an apology for people who are sexist in the workplace. I believe there's no place for that. But I think there is definitely a lack of conversation and, like you're saying, awareness, a lack of training. And it's not like it's like not out in broad daylight and everybody's like, hey, don't do that. That's rude. But there's some people who it just doesn't click. It doesn't click. Yeah. And so, and the interesting thing about that is that these are stereotypes that we inherit. The minute we say we're in technology, I'm a programmer, I'm a whatever, the minute we say that, people are going to think, oh, you're probably on the spectrum, or oh, you have bad social skills, or oh, you're a sexist, right? And so now we have this great opportunity, because I really like to frame things instead of, something like, here's this really big hardship we have, here's an opportunity we have to help rebrand ourselves, right? That's a pretty cool opportunity, and it's a lot for some people to take on. But imagine if you did rebrand yourself as someone who respected the work, regardless of gender or any of that other stuff, who was able to communicate to executives or customers or to manage a team or all that stuff. Like I said, when I got off stage, that lady's like, are you sure you're a technologist? Because no technologists do what I just saw. That's when you're going to go into meetings and people are going to say things like, well, Dave's a programmer, but he has one of the greatest strategy minds and he's a great leader. And you're going to be like, wait, what? Because they're saying Dave's a programmer, but and it's Dave's a programmer, and that comes along with a lot of baggage. It'll be interesting to see how the brand and that baggage shifts over the next 10 or 15 years.
Yeah. And you're talking about stereotypes, and the stereotypes have changed, right? And I'm relearning the stereotype right now, because, back when I started speaking in the 90s, to me, the stereotype was, this overweight guy eating Twinkies in his mom's basement, playing games most of the day. And that's the stereotypical software engineer. But I can't really say that anymore, right? And yes, some of those people still exist, but I think we've, evolved to a different place that we are, right? And then even if you think about, I was just thinking about, even if you think about like when Google came around, right? And if you saw videos of the inside of the Google offices with slides, and, it just seemed like they were goofing off all the time, right? And so then maybe that became its, the kind of stereotype that, they're just farting around doing nothing most of the time, and, sliding down slides and, playing ping pong, and that's what they do at work. And, that's not really true either, and so, things change, and even the stereotypical, to me, and this is one of the reasons I really love not only speaking in different, states in America, but speaking in different countries, but, the stereotypical developer is different in different countries and different areas, right? It's like, I was talking about Ukraine at the beginning of the show, and I vividly remember, because I thought this was really interesting to me is, and that is, I don't know what it is now, but the percentage of men to women in our industry is pretty low, and it was really a lot lower when I started. Right, there's very few women when I started, and I'm so glad it's getting better. But I was standing in back of the conference area, where we're having the sessions in the Ukraine, and one of the conference organizers walked up to me, and right before she did that, I was looking at the crowd, and I was looking. There were a lot of women in the crowd, right? And I was thinking to myself, are these all girlfriends and wives the developers brought with them? And why are there so many women here? I don't get it. Coming from America. And so I asked her, and I said, I got in a conversation with her, and I said, okay, so what do you think the ratio between women and men here are? And she goes, it's about 40%.
Wow.
And she goes, and she said it's even higher in the actual IT part of it, the DevOps part, right, than the engineering part. And there's more women in the DevOps part than the engineering part. And I was fascinated by that because, things are different everywhere you go, right?
Yeah.
And so therefore the stereotype is challenged every place you go, right? But when I go to India, people there are really shy, and even when I in front of Indian developers here, they're shy, right? And because I know that, sometimes I try to extrapolate stuff out of them because I know they're probably not going to ask a question or something because of their culture, and they're shy and all that kind of stuff, right?
I'm thinking of Tekorama, which I've spoken at in Belgium, and same thing. There was way more women. It's a very young crowd, and a lot more women than I expected to see. So then my brain starts to think, okay, what does that mean? What does that mean in the workplace as far as how we act and interact? Well, I don't know about you, Dave. I'm guessing this is true because you've been in the industry a while, but I've been in meetings with all men, and there's some dirty jokes.
Yeah.
And I don't like that. I've never liked it. It's always made me feel uncomfortable, especially when I remember I was in a meeting with the executives. I think it was a board meeting. And so these are like senior leaders. And there was a few dirty jokes and innuendos. And I was like, this is wholly inappropriate, right?
Right.
Well,
we're not in high school,
Yeah. And it's weird when you look at these leaders who are, they got a couple decades on you and they're making a heck of a lot of money, and they're directing at a very high level the strategy of an organization. And then they let these things slip by. And it's like, let me rephrase that. They say the jokes, right? And then people have an uncomfortable laugh. It's just really weird. Well, I think as more women enter the workforce, and not to say that women aren't crude or can't be crude or whatever, but generally, I think there's going to be a cleaning up and an appropriateness in a meeting, with one exception. In every meeting that I've been in that I can think of right now, when women are there, it's a lot more respectful, right? And I'm not necessarily saying that women are like given a red carpet and everyone's very respectful to the women, and that they're singling them out. But there's not the crude jokes, right? And they people seem to stay more on target and more on topic. So yeah, it'll be really interesting how this shift of what the dynamics of the workforce are impact what our communication is and how we think about other people. Let me give you an example. So one of my favorite courses is called Leading with Emotional Intelligence. So emotional intelligence, I thought, was like this frou-frou concept that somebody came up with just to have some soft skills version of IQ, right? So EQ is emotional intelligence. And I thought it was kind of just a bunch of soft garbage stuff until I really started digging down into it. And by the time I was done, I walked away thinking, okay, if people up their game on emotional intelligence, we can change the world. We can literally change the world from the bickering and the hating and the fighting and the teasing and all this stuff that's happening around us. Can you imagine going into an environment, a workplace, whether you're remote or in an office, you go into your meetings and stuff, and people have these are some of the pillars of emotional intelligence: higher self-awareness, right? So they're more careful and they're more guarded on some of the things that they say and keep things appropriate. They have higher awareness of others. That's another pillar of emotional intelligence. Well, we call that empathy, right? So what would happen in our work environment if people were more considerate of the people around them and they were just kinder? Because I've been in meetings where people are like, oh my gosh, drama queen, or oh my gosh, they always have to do this, or blah, blah, blah. And it's like, you know what if we just slow down and we just think, you know what, they're really having a hard time at home, or they have a huge load that they're dealing with, or they have a lot of deadlines coming up, or whatever it is. But if we can pull ourselves out of our ego and our projects and our expectations and look at people around us and say, how can I help that person? How can I create a safer environment for them? Man, if we could just work on our emotional intelligence, I really do think we can change the world. So as more women get involved in the tech environment and on our teams, I'm hoping that some of those things increase. Not just because women are going to bring more empathy in, but men are going to stand back and say, okay, you know what, I'm kind of a jerk. Maybe I shouldn't say words this way. Maybe I shouldn't come across this way. And that's that self-awareness because of the awareness of others. I don't know. Like I said, it'll be interesting to see what happens in the workforce in the next 10 or 15 years.
Well, you're right with the social, like people in meetings, guys in meetings and stuff like that. I won't get into like the Silicon Valley,
the club,
jacuzzi meetings and stuff like that. But if you just look at even, our lawmakers and our leaders, CEOs and stuff, and how much trouble they get in. You look at this guy going, look at Bill Gates, right? When we were all shocked when Bill Gates, we found out that, he was cheating on his wife. But, if you really think about people at that level, I think they all do, and I don't want to get into that part of it. But what I'm trying to say is that, everybody has these issues, right? It doesn't matter how much you look up to them. And sometimes I get into a discussion, and especially sometimes I think about this more like when I'm going to India, because, people in India idolize certain people differently than we do here. And one of the things I get to talk to sometimes is that, when everybody says, Zuckerberg is such a great guy, and Bezos is such a great guy, and Elon Musk is such a great guy, and they idolize them, and I'm going, well, I think you should idolize their intellect, but I don't know if you should idolize the rest of them. because
their humanity.
Their humanity, because it's out of whack, number one. And number two, I look at most of those people, and I'm even including some musicians, because I'm a musician and do photography for bands and stuff. I'm including some musicians in this, is that there's some musicians I idolize and that I look up to as far as their guitar talent and stuff like that.
Their hard skills?
Yeah, their hard skills, but I would never want to be around them, right? Yeah. I don't ever want to be around Zuckerberg, right? I tell people, and my friend laughs at me, he goes, I just look at Zuckerberg and there's a guy that I wouldn't even let babysit my grandkids, right? Just by looking at him, right?
That's so funny.
And so, everybody has different sides. And I think we need to realize that, like you were saying, and then try to understand these different sides. And especially like you were saying that, I think more and more now that this happens now than when I started, my career, is trying to understand what else is going on in this person's life, right? Are they, having troubles at home? Are they going through chemo or something like that? It's making them cranky. We have to be more cognizant of that stuff nowadays, I think, than we did in the past.
Yeah. Have you been around or interacted much with autistic people?
Not too much. Right before summer started, a high school friend of mine came out, and he's on the spectrum. Yeah.
Okay.
So, and it's very difficult.
Well, it's interesting. There's a lot of, so I'm a very teasing person. I like to get laughs and make light of things. And I really have been working over the decades to make that less about a person and more about a situation. Right.
Right.
So my best friend's son, who's in his 20s, And then my nephew, who's in his early teens, they're both on the spectrum. And what I've learned in my interactions with them is that they don't get humor.
Mm-mm.
They do not understand humor.
No.
And I have had to be extremely careful in how I communicate with both of them,
Mhm.
because at no point in my life do I ever want them to think that I'm teasing or bullying them,
Right.
and I don't want them to feel bad because I say something and they might take it the wrong way, or they don't understand it or whatever. So that kind of shifts the conversation a little bit to, there's another one of my courses. It's called Working and Communicating with Different Personalities. And in this course, I talk about like the Myers-Briggs, which is like, there's like arguable whether it's actually good science or bad science. For me, it's like a data point, right? It's like, okay, this is interesting. Let's take it and then let's critically think about it. And then maybe take a few other data points from other personality assessments. But one of the phrases that jumps out to me is how do I prefer to something? How do I prefer to take an information? Do I prefer stories and an emotional pull, or do I prefer data? Right. Well, the cool thing about this, and when I go through this course on working and communicating with different personalities, one of my main points in there is I want you to learn about the personality conversation so that you can work better with other people. But I also want you to understand yourself better, right? I love stories. I am moved by stories. I like to tell stories. I like data, but one of my favorite books in the world, in the history of books, is called How to Lie with Statistics, right? And so I like data, but I am also kind of leery of data. Like I'm suspicious about how it's presented and why it's presented and all that stuff. Well, if you're going to be if you're let's say not even just in a meeting, but let's say you're on your team, you have people who need data. That's an empathy thing. That's a awareness of others. Be aware of what their preferences are on how they want to receive data or information, so that you can influence them. Right? How can I best persuade? How can I sell something? How can I help our team become better or more productive or hit our goals or targets or whatever? And if that means that I communicate with my colleagues more with data, but I communicate with the leaders more with stories, right? So anyways, how do I prefer to receive data? How do I prefer to share data? It's so interesting when you start learning about. I think people need to come outside of how I work myself and start to think, okay, how does Dave think? What can I say to Dave that will most impact him to feel or think or move or whatever? And that's a manifestation of your soft skills. That's when your soft skills really come into play. And you don't walk away feeling manipulated. And at no time do I want to feel like I'm manipulating you, but I am persuading you and I'm impacting you. And when you get better at these soft skills, you get better at persuading and impacting people around you, which is pretty powerful.
Right. And it reminds me of, one of the things I tell people they need to learn how to speak in front of people, because, when you're in a meeting or wherever you are at work or in your personal life, you need to learn how to get your idea across, right? And if you just sit there and be silent, it's not going to happen, right? And in that same vein, and I will admit I have a problem with this because I don't get enough practice with it, and that is, the way I talk to you, a developer, is different than I would talk to a VP, right? Or a CEO of a company, right? And I don't want to say I dumb down what I'm saying. I just have to change what I'm saying to fit to make them understand better, right? And something I learned a long time ago, and I say this in one of my conference talks, is that my big passion these days is code quality and code performance, and it's pretty much all I write and speak about. And I learned a long time ago that you can say all these things you want, into management, because I say this all the time, that everybody above you doesn't care about what I'm talking about, right? They don't care. They care about something different, right? They care about features. They care about releasing products so they can make money, right? They don't care about code quality because it doesn't impact them at all, right? But we do, because it impacts us, right? So, we, what was I going with that? We have to, we just have to change how we talk about things. Oh, I know what I was going to say. Is that a long time ago, the company I was working at, not too far from here, is when I understood that the management, the project managers, the VP of project management, the management, right? They care about money, right? We don't care about money really, except for our paycheck, right? But they care about money because that's how the company runs, right?
And so they might be compensated on that too.
Right. And so if you can explain what you're talking about and relate that to money somehow, they get it. And I'll tell you a story about this company. Is that when I started this company, we were using this really piece of crap source control program that was causing a lot of extra work on everybody. And I screamed and yelled about this thing for a long time, right? But until I went around and talked to most of the developers and then asked them, how much time are you wasting on the source control program a week? And I took that data, I calculated the base average salary of all those developers, right? And I presented that number to the company going, this is how much money we're losing every week. We're using this piece of crap software control program. They said, oh, okay, we'll get it. We'll get what you want then.
Yeah,
it was like a language. It was a light bulb going off, right? But I had to learn how to, like you said, speak in their language, right? That they could understand what I'm talking about. So before we wrap up, because we're running out of time already, and that is, we've talked a lot about soft skills. We've talked a lot about how important they are, and told some stories about that. But so hopefully everybody watching right now, and thousands of people that are watching are going, okay, maybe I need to brush up my soft skills. So how do they do that? How do they go about, learning these soft skills? What are like the top 3 suggestions you have? And and you can include your Pluralsight courses in that, because I'm definitely going to watch some of yours after the show. Actually, when you were last talking, I'm going, dang it, I'm going to have to download a bunch of Jason's.
Hey, you got a long flight.
Yeah, I got a long flight. I'm going to watch them on the flight because I need to concentrate on these. Like these are not these are not sessions I can just passively listen to. I have to actively listen to it. Yeah.
So 36 courses, that's a lot of courses. And I talk about productivity and personalities and presentations and listening, and I'm kind of all over the place. And in my presentations, I really like to, help you understand what the concept is, give you some examples, and then give you some tactical things to work on, right? By the time you're done watching my course, I think it's easy to feel overwhelmed. And it's like, oh, okay, I can't do these 15 things. And in most of my courses, what I say is, look, pick one thing and practice it. If it's listening, then practice that reflective listening. If it's productivity, then practice focusing for 20 minutes on a project, every hour or something like that. Whatever if it's an emotional intelligence, then practice self-awareness or awareness of others or whatever. But the point that I have is, it's easy to get overwhelmed with the hundreds or the thousands of things that you can do. Pick one thing and practice it. And then when you feel comfortable, not even when you master it, whatever that means, but when you feel comfortable with it, then add another thing that you can practice. And if it takes you a week to feel comfortable, great. If it takes you 3 months to feel comfortable, great. Can you imagine progressing in one of these skills over 3 months and how that can impact you and your career and your happiness versus just not practicing it at all? For example, very, very hard and scary, like you said, was it 20 years ago? Get on stage, go present something, and people, public speaking is one of the top 5 most feared things in the world, like death and divorce and job loss.
Public
speaking's up there, right? And it freaks people out. And the thing is, let me give you permission. You're going to stink for like the first 6
I'm
months,
sure I did.
12 months, 2 years. You're just not going to be excellent. But if you get to practice and you practice more and more and more, you'll have experiences where you're like, oh my gosh, I'm actually pretty good at this and I'm not as nervous and I did a better job this time. Your progress is going to come through regular practice. So my advice is pick something. Don't try and say, I'm going to be a better listener by the end of the year. Just say, I'm going to work on active listening for the next 30 days, right? Pick one specific tactic, practice it. And then when you feel comfortable, add another tactic to practice.
Yeah. And with the speaking, it took me years really before I was comfortable. And the one thing I like to throw out there, which I do a lot, is that, if you want to get, if you realize you need to learn how to speak in front of people and you want to kind of get out there and put yourself out there, and this is what helped me, because I ran a user group for 20 years, right? I started the user group the first year I became a software developer. A couple months later was my very first session and I never stopped. And so if you go and join your, if in America, you go join your local user group, or like in India, if you go join your local CSharpCorner chapter and go to every monthly meeting, go to every meeting, right? And then sign up to speak, or even when you're uncomfortable, and then sign up to speak at some of those meetings, right? When something pops in your head you want to do, right? And when I ran my user group, our meetings were 3 hours long, and I specifically had a section at the beginning of the meeting that I allowed people to do like their very first 20-minute session ever in their life, right? Because it's just a short 20-minute session to get their feet wet, and it's only 20 minutes. So if someone says you suck, then oh well, there's still the rest of the meeting was fine then, right? But I specifically had that time and invited people to come in and learn how to speak by doing, that first 20 minutes of the meeting.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Love it.
So I got to wrap it up before Simon gets mad at me because it's almost 11:30 and probably wants to go out and party, because he's young and, that's what young people do.
Oh, those were the days.
I know.
Enjoy it again, Simon.
I tell Simon, make sure you get all the drinking and stuff you in now, because when you get older like me, it's almost impossible. So have your fun now. So I really appreciate you being on, and I'm going to have you back on. And like I said, I'm definitely going to download some of your courses for my very, very long plane rides back and forth to India. But the last question I ask all my guests is, what do you do for fun? It's not coding.
I've been sick for so long that I don't even know. I love snorkeling. I love being underwater. I love the colors.
Where you live?
I'm in Utah, so there's really bad snorkeling here. But I was in Hawaii earlier this year, and I'm sure I'll go back. I love exploring and touching animals. I know some people hate that, but I grew up in tropical island, and animals. I love animals. I just found out my favorite animal, which was hard to finally choose, but this is a gift I got from someone. It's an octopus, and it was painted by an Indian in Alaska. But snorkeling. I'm going to go with that.
Yeah,
I like a lot of stuff. But
yeah, I was in Utah this year, and I saw for the very first time. I actually saw the Great Salt Lake, and I actually walked down there and took a bunch of pictures and cool. It's kind of sad that what's going on with that, it's
drying up.
I know it's too bad, because you guys have a wonderful ecosystem there that's just kind of going away, unfortunately.
Yeah, it's really sad. It's a big issue.
Yeah, it does create some really cool colors to photograph, but but you see the docks are dry and the boats are just sitting there, and so
it's crazy.
Yeah. And but Utah's a beautiful part of the country, and
it really is.
Unfortunately I have not seen enough of it, and I hope to get back there someday and look at it. But I enjoyed seeing the Great Salt Lake, even though and it might not be there someday, so I'm glad to see I got to see some of it at least.
Yeah, true.
Yeah. Well, I'll let you go, and thanks a lot for being on the show, and you're always welcome to come back anytime you want. and I'll probably hit you up again next year because, I invite all my guests back. But, I think this is, this subject is one of the subjects that are really important to me because I just don't feel that it's talked enough about. And I know it's not talked enough about at conferences, right? And one of the things I've been saying a lot lately is that, conferences not only need to teach what we want to learn, but conferences need to teach what we need to learn.
Well, I like that.
Right? Yeah. And unfortunately, especially the big paid conferences don't do that very well. And I've been trying to get them to do that. And because like we've been saying, Jason and I've been saying that these are skills you're going to need, your entire career, and skills you're going to need in your personal life too.
Yeah, absolutely. Hey, thanks, Dave. Thanks for the opportunity.
Thanks a lot. And I hope you have a great weekend and get some snorkeling in wherever you go snorkeling up there.
Thank you.
Thanks. Well, that was a really great session. And I'm not kidding. I'm going to download a bunch of Jason's courses on Pluralsight. I don't know if I have the app on my phone still, but I'm definitely going to download some of his courses and watch them on the plane ride back and forth to India next month. So next month, 2 weeks. All right. Thank you, Jason. That was an awesome guest. Don't forget, I've been working super hard this summer and this fall in updating all of my code metrics for .NET 6 and .NET 7. So if you go to this URL there, I've put a big portion of my code performance book up there. Some of it's free, some of it's subscription. I hope you pay for the subscription because that's where the real meat of the articles are. And it's really cheap. It's like $4.95 a month. And help me out because I'm trying to save up for retirement. But this will help you out in choosing how to do different things in .NET based on performance metrics. And so I've been working super, super hard this summer on that. I'm pretty close. I have all my benchmarks working. I'm going to run them as soon as they do the final release. Release candidate of .NET is out now, so I just reran some of those tests and put those metrics up on the internet for you. So I hope you go check that out and do that or buy my code performance book, which all the proceeds go to the Voice of Slum. Also, don't forget about my coding standards book. Most of you don't have coding standards at work, at least where I end up working. And so you need coding standards. So I hope my book will start you off in a good way. I saw this on Twitter this week. I thought it was interesting. And this is completely true. And this is why I speak so much about, the young developer goes, why do I care about this? Well, here's why you need to care about this. Year 0, let me write code. One line with complex abstractions. I'm so clever. Look at me. And then year 10 or 15 or however, let me write this code that the future me can easily understand it. And this is what I talk about a lot in one of my conference sessions, is that we need to write code that's easy to understand, because you might have to look at that 6 months or years later from now, and you don't want to say, what the heck is going on? And you don't want to look at that code for 20 minutes or an hour or more trying to figure out what the heck it's doing. So make sure you use good coding practices and good coding standards. I like that graphic. Like every week, help me help the kids from India. I have 3 ways you can help the kids from India. I'm going to be visiting the Voice of Slum organization when I'm back there in a couple weeks to see how things are going. I, along with Joe G, are going to be donating some laptops to the orphanage, which I'm really happy that we're going to do that because the people who run it told me that the last time I was there. So I hope you will help me help the kids in the slums in India. It's very important to me. I talk about it every week, but there's 3 ways to help. You can go to voiceofslum.org and donate directly. And there's lots of stuff you can donate. You can buy school clothes. You can buy school supplies. You can donate money. You can go to this GoFundMe page that I started. And as soon as more money gets into it, I'll donate that. I can't talk today. I'll donate that to the Voice of Slum. I made a donation earlier this year based off of everything you've donated to it. And if you buy my current coding standards book, Code Performance book in paperback format, 100% of the proceeds for that go to the Voice of Slum every month. So there's lots of ways to help these kids. They really, really need our support. And as software engineers, we can help them do it. Okay, with that, next week, like I said at the beginning of the show, is the 2nd anniversary show. I'm excited that I've been doing this 2 years now. It doesn't seem like 2 years to me. I don't know about you, Simon, but this time has kind of flown by for me. But I'm having a hard time remembering who some of my guests are. That's how fast this has kind of flown by me. So we're going to have a special anniversary show next week. I hope you join us for that. That'll be the last show before I go to India. We'll have one show. I'm not going to tell you what it is. While I'm in India, we're going to pre-record it this coming week. I'm not going to tell you who the guest is because it's somebody I've been wanting to have on this show for a very, very long time. I finally got them, and we're pre-recording it this week. Simon and I are, and we're going to be showing it while I'm in India. And Simon said something to me. So I hope you join us for all that fun. As always, please be safe. Listen to your medical professionals about COVID. You know, Jason's getting over COVID. I just heard this morning that, 200 to 500 people are dying from COVID every day in America. So it's pretty much over, but, we're still living with COVID. We are going to be living with COVID for a very long time. So please be safe. Please listen to your medical professionals. Clean your hands. I clean my hands whenever I go out. And one thing you can do is help by donating blood to your local blood bank. I do this all the time. I tried to do it last week, but my iron was 1 point under, and so I was turned away. So I'll be doing it. I'll be trying again next Sunday. But please donate your local blood bank. It helps. One blood donation can help 3 of your fellow humans. And right now, at least in San Diego, we are in a big shortage of blood right now because the San Diego Blood Bank has been tweeting like crazy this week how big of a shortage they are. So if they're in a shortage, I'm sure the rest of the country and maybe other countries are in a shortage too. So please take 30 minutes out of your day and go to donate blood. If you do that and send me proof, I will send you some swag, including a copy of my book if you live in America. If you live in a different part of the country, you'll just get my praise and thank you. And if in India, I'll bring it to India in 2 weeks for you. Because shipping to other countries, as I found out the hard way, is just rather too expensive for me to afford. And so, but please donate anyway. Don't donate because I'm giving you free crap. Donate because it's going to help you, a fellow human. All right. With that said, don't forget to join us for our 2nd anniversary show next week. Don't forget to email me suggestions, comments, all that kind of cool stuff to Rockin The Code World at CSharpCorner.com. And with that, I'll see you next week, geeks. Bye.